Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Tech This Week. My name is Apulak. Hope all of you are keeping well. So today, I'm going to talk about something that most of you would have noticed at home. And it's something that I guess a lot of debates run around. I want to talk about books. And I know it's something that I think every parent talks about. And so here it goes. This is how I look at things. So if you give a child a book in today's day and a screen, you know, which one would a child go for? The choice is kind of obvious, right? I'm talking about especially younger kids. They'll probably pick the screen, almost every time without any hesitation. Not because you have to understand, not because they dislike reading, because the screen feels easier, right? Which brings us to today's question and the topic that I thought of sharing my views and perspective. Is reading, becoming redundant in the age of experiential learning, or is there more to it? You know, let's try to understand this. Because we often assume that children are distracted due to screens, but honestly, that is not the complete picture, right? In fact, I've seen in many kids, in more ways than one, they're actually learning just in a way that feels far more effortless. For instance, a screen explains things, shows things, and connects, ideas without much effort or pushback. But just understand, a book, on the other hand, makes you work much more before anything starts making any sense. You have to read, pause, understand, interpret, and stay with it for a while. So here it goes. When it comes to screens, you're actually it is kind of reducing the effort right at the start. As far as books go, it's asking for a lot of effort upfront. So what we are seeing is not a drop in interest of, say, reading books alone. It's a shift in preferences. The children are, naturally moving to easier ways of understanding things, right? So it's like a child reads a book, a child sees an animation of the same book. It's so much easier to absorb the what they see, absorb, or at least they get more excited seeing the visual imagery of the animation. But this is where it is. Before we dismiss books, let's ask one important question. Is reading still important? Or are we holding on to nostalgia? Because you have to understand, if reading is just about nostalgia, then it will not find its place for far too long. So this is where we, I think, will dug deep to find the answer. The honest answer to this is that reading, is not just another way of consuming information. It is a process where the brain has to actively make sense of symbols. The process, and you have to understand, the process is not natural. You don't learn like from the word go. It's something that the brain, learns over time. And once it learns, something very interesting happens. Different parts of the brain start working together in new ways. Language, reasoning, comprehension skills, they begin to strengthen together. And you'll be thinking these are all words, but consider this. The human being has been around for millions of years. How come writing came much, much later? It's only 6,000 years that writing came into being. And yet, once writing emerged, our evolutionary progress has accelerated far more than ever before. Because for the first time, knowledge could not only be stored but passed on reliably. And reading became the way we absorb and build on the knowledge. So reading is not outdated. You've got to understand that there is a reason why reading still exists. In fact, it is a foundational how we first learn to think. So what a child needs, they're not they're not just learning information. They are learning how to process and build meaning of their own. That's why reading is important. So what's fundamentally different between these two models? We don't answer this, right? It is not about One is being better than the other. So this is where the difference between these two, between screen and books, become more subtle, but very important. Screens, first of all, let me call it out. And I'm not trying to take sides, but very clearly, screens are not bad. They're actually very effective in many situations. And we'll come to that, right? But again, scenario. When a child reads about a forest, they create the forest in their mind. We do, right? Another child reads the same page and imagines something completely different. That is just not reading, this is the brain actively constructing reality in their own ways. The screen completely removes that step, right? It shows you the forest exactly as someone else who created imagery had imagined. And when that keeps happening, imagination slowly stops being exercised in children. There's another assumption we make, that needs to be questioned. You know, we think, through screens, that if the child is engaged, the child is learning well. But engagement is not the same thing, you've got to understand, as understanding. I'll give you an example. A child may finish, a gamified exercise very happily, but unfortunately may forget most of it very soon. But a child may struggle going through a chapter, yet, because probably of the struggle and the way we've thought through, they'll remember this chapter for years to come. So screens usually win attention in the beginning, right? Books usually win retention in the long run. So one may argue that it's not the case with adults. Adults think differently. Yes, you're right. But in young children, this effect is very profound. When this is a stage when where the foundations of thinking are actually being built. So the question that very naturally will come to you, if or for all those who are listening to this, is, Abram, are you saying we should throw away new learning methods in favor of books? In fact, like I said, and I stick to this, my answer will be no. And I'll tell you why. There is space for both. This is not a battle between books and screens, my friends. It is about what role each of them should play in how we learn, right? It is important because it builds a foundation of how we think. And once that foundation is in place, learning does not need to stay tied to books alone. We have probably far better tools today to explain and simplify complex ideas. The real mistake is not using these tools. The real mistake is using them much before the foundation is built. That's what I'm saying. So, because when this happens, learning becomes dependent instead of independent. And if the outcome we care about is independent thinking, the way we learn is structured has to reflect that. For years we've kept changing. We've kept trying to change what is being taught. But the real impact probably will come when we change how it is being taught. Technology will continue to make learning faster. But a question that I ask all of you is the outcome and how we choose to teach. Both will coexist, and how you benefit from both. That's it from my end. A lot to think through. Share your perspective, share your views. Have a great week ahead.